The Honorable Judge Patricia Sullivan's gavel froze mid-air as 6-year-old Lily Kate Brennan placed her trembling hand on the German Shepherd's scarred head. Rex's response was immediate and terrifying, a bone-deep growl that seemed to emerge from the depths of hell itself, his golden eyes locked onto Dr. Marcus Sinclair with unmistakable recognition. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Court stenographer Margaret Chen's fingers stopped typing, her face draining of color as Bailiff Thomas Mackenzie's hand instinctively moved toward his weapon. The gallery erupted in confused murmurs while Lily's mother, Claire, gripped the wooden bench until her knuckles turned white. Lily had been mute for 8 months, ever since that spring afternoon when everything changed, yet somehow this silent signal spoke louder than any testimony ever could. "This court will recess immediately," Judge Sullivan commanded, though her voice betrayed the tremor running through her seasoned composure. What had this child and her dog just revealed? And why did it feel like they'd all been living with a monster hiding in plain sight? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. 8 months earlier, Savannah's historic district had been a picture of southern charm where Spanish moss draped ancient oak trees like delicate lace curtains, and the scent of blooming azaleas promised renewal with every spring breeze. The cobblestone streets of the old neighborhood echoed with children's laughter and the gentle creak of porch swings, where neighbors still knew each other's business, and grandmothers watched from their front steps with eagle eyes and sweet tea in hand. Lily Catherine Brennan had been the sunshine of Magnolia Street, a precocious 6-year-old with golden curls that caught the light and a voice that could charm the sternest hearts. Her parents, Claire and Thomas Brennan, represented the backbone of working-class Savannah. She taught 3rd grade at Forsyth Elementary, while he supervised construction crews rebuilding the city's historic facades. Their modest Victorian home, painted buttercup yellow with white trim, sat between towering mansions that whispered of old money and older secrets. Next door lived Meemaw Brennan, Thomas's 72-year-old mother, whose arthritic hands never stopped moving, knitting scarves for church raffles, tending her prize-winning rose garden, or waving from her wraparound porch where she maintained unofficial watch over the entire block. "Back in my day," she'd often say while rocking in her late husband's chair, "we looked after each other's children like they were our own blood." The Brennan family scraped by on love and determination, their mortgage payments stretching their budget thin as Claire's teacher salary and Thomas's construction wages barely covered rising costs. Yet their home overflowed with warmth, Sunday dinners around Meemaw's antique table, bedtime stories that Claire brought to life with different voices, and Saturday morning pancakes that Thomas flipped high enough to make Lily squeal with delight. Dr. Marcus Robert Sinclair lived just 3 blocks away in the crown jewel of the historic district, a sprawling antebellum mansion with towering white columns and perfectly manicured gardens. At 54, the recently retired pediatrician commanded respect throughout Savannah's social circles, serving as deacon at First Presbyterian and volunteering countless hours at the Children's Hospital. His silver hair and kind eyes had comforted thousands of worried parents over 3 decades of practice. But beneath Savannah's genteel surface, something dark had begun to stir. The same Spanish moss that created romantic shadows now seemed to hide watching eyes, and the sweet fragrance of magnolia blossoms couldn't quite mask the growing sense that evil had found its way into their peaceful corner of the world. The morning of April 15th dawned with the kind of perfect spring weather that made Savannah residents count their blessings. Azaleas burst in brilliant pink cascades along Magnolia Street, while a gentle breeze carried the sweet perfume of jasmine through screen doors and open windows. Claire Brennan hummed softly as she pinned Thomas's work shirts to the clothesline, watching Lily chase butterflies around their small front yard with the carefree abandon that only 6-year-olds possessed. From her porch next door, Meemaw Brennan rocked slowly in her late husband's chair, her arthritic fingers working steadily on a pale yellow baby blanket for the church nursery. Her keen eyes swept the neighborhood with practiced vigilance. 40 years of living on this street had taught her to notice when something felt off, and today her joints ached in a way that usually meant trouble was brewing. The phone's shrill ring pulled Claire inside, leaving Lily to her butterfly hunt while the screen door banged gently in the breeze. It was the school principal calling about covering an extra class, and Claire found herself drawn into an unexpected conversation about curriculum changes and budget cuts. Through the kitchen window, she could see her daughter twirling in her favorite pink sundress, golden curls catching the sunlight like spun silk. Dr. Marcus Sinclair's black Mercedes glided silently down Magnolia Street, its polished surface reflecting the dappled shadows of the overhead canopy. To any observer, he appeared exactly as he had for 30 years. The neighborhood's beloved pediatrician making his rounds, medical bag in hand, his silver hair perfectly combed and his smile warm and reassuring. Children waved from their yards, parents called out friendly greetings, and elderly residents nodded respectfully as he passed. But today, something fundamental had shifted in Marcus Sinclair's carefully constructed world. The medications that had kept his grief-induced delusions at bay were no longer working, and the voice of his dead wife, Rebecca, whispered constantly in his ear now, urging him to protect innocent children from the dangerous world that had claimed their daughter, Emma. In his fractured mind, every little girl became Emma. Every moment of childhood joy became a countdown to inevitable tragedy. He parked directly in front of the Brennan house, his movements deliberate and practiced. The medical bag contained no instruments of healing today. Instead, it held chloroform-soaked rags, zip ties, and children's vitamins laced with sedatives. His plan was simple: gain the child's trust, lure her to his car, and transport her to the specially prepared room in his mansion's basement where she would be safe forever. "Hello there, sweet pea, Doctor." Sinclair called softly as he approached the gate, his voice carrying the same gentle tone that had comforted thousands of sick children over the decades. Lily looked up from her butterfly chase, her face brightening with recognition. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Dr. Marcus. He had delivered half the babies on their street and treated every childhood illness with patience and kindness. "Is your mama home, darling? I have some special medicine that might help you grow even stronger and prettier." He opened his medical bag slightly, revealing what appeared to be colorful vitamins, but was actually his carefully prepared trap. "These are very special, only for the bravest, most wonderful little girls." Lily tilted her head curiously, her natural trust warring with an instinct she couldn't yet name. Something about Dr. Marcus seemed different today. His smile was too wide, his eyes too bright, and his hands trembled slightly as he reached toward her. "Mama's on the phone," she said uncertainly, taking a small step backward. From her porch, Meemaw's arthritis suddenly flared with vicious intensity, sending shooting pains through her swollen joints. She looked up sharply from her knitting, her grandmother's intuition screaming danger as she watched the beloved doctor's interaction with Lily. Something was wrong, terribly, fundamentally wrong, and every instinct, honed by 7 decades of life, told her to act. "I have something even more special in my car," Dr. Sinclair continued, his voice taking on an urgent edge as he gently grasped Lily's small hand. "A surprise that will keep you safe from all the bad things in this world. Your mama will understand. She wants you to be protected, doesn't she?" "Marcus Robert Sinclair." Meemaw's voice cracked like a whip across the morning air, her rocking chair clattering as she struggled to her feet. "What in the Sam Hill are you doing with that child?" The doctor's mask slipped for just an instant, revealing something cold and desperate underneath before snapping back into place. "Just checking on our little angel here, Miss Brennan, making sure she's healthy and safe." But Lily had seen that momentary transformation, and terror flooded her small body as she yanked her hand free and ran toward the house. Claire burst through the screen door just as Lily crashed into her arms, both of them trembling as Dr. Sinclair calmly closed his medical bag, tipped his hat politely, and walked back to his Mercedes with measured steps. 2 weeks after the encounter with Dr. Sinclair, the Brennan household had transformed into a fortress of worry and whispered conversations. Lily's bright chatter had vanished as completely as morning dew, replaced by a silence so profound it seemed to echo through every room of their yellow Victorian home. She no longer ran to greet Thomas when he returned from work, dirt-stained and exhausted. She didn't beg Claire for one more bedtime story or giggle at Meemaw's silly jokes about talking squirrels. The child who had once filled their lives with sunshine now sat motionless for hours, staring out windows with eyes that seemed far older than her 6 years. Nightmares plagued her sleep. She would wake, screaming silently, her mouth open in terror, but no sound emerging, her small body drenched in sweat and trembling like a leaf in a storm. Claire would hold her daughter through these episodes, rocking her back and forth while her own tears fell into Lily's golden curls. "Doctor." Patricia Hammond, Savannah's most respected child psychologist, had tried everything in her considerable arsenal. Play therapy sessions where Lily sat frozen among colorful toys. Art therapy, where she produced only dark scribbles that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Traditional talk therapy that met with complete silence, as if Lily's voice had been locked away in some unreachable vault within her soul. Selective mutism, Dr. Hammond explained to Claire and Thomas during a particularly difficult consultation. It's a trauma response not uncommon in children who've experienced a severe psychological shock. The mind essentially creates a protective barrier, shutting down communication as a defense mechanism. Thomas ran his calloused hands through his hair, his construction worker's strength feeling utterly useless against his daughter's invisible wounds. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How long before she gets better, doctor?" Hammond's pause spoke volumes. Some children recover within months, others. She left the sentence hanging, but the implications crashed over Claire like a cold wave. The financial strain was crushing them slowly but surely. Each therapy session cost $200, money they didn't have, borrowed against credit cards that were already maxed out from medical bills and everyday expenses. Thomas picked up weekend jobs, working 18-hour days that left him exhausted and irritable. Claire considered leaving her teaching position to watch Lily full-time, but they needed her salary desperately. Meemaw sold her late husband's antique pocket watch, a family heirloom she'd treasured for 40 years, to help pay for treatments. "That's what family is for," she declared firmly when Claire protested through tears. "Money's just paper sugar. That baby's worth more than all the gold in Georgia." It was during their darkest hour that Dr. Sarah Elizabeth Hayes appeared like an answer to unspoken prayers. The director of Savannah's Animal Therapy Center had heard about Lily's case through professional networks and made an unprecedented offer. "I have a dog," she explained, during a home visit that felt more like divine intervention than medical consultation. "His name is Rex, and he's been through his own hell. Sometimes broken souls can heal each other in ways that traditional therapy can't touch." Dr. Hayes was a woman who carried her own hidden grief with quiet dignity. At 48, she had dedicated her life to pairing traumatized animals with traumatized people after losing her sister Rebecca in a car accident 3 years earlier. Her work had become both professional mission and personal therapy, though she kept the depth of her pain carefully concealed behind clinical expertise and genuine compassion. Rex was a decorated K-9 officer, she continued, showing the Brennans a photograph of a magnificent German shepherd in full police regalia. 2 years ago, he and his handler responded to a domestic violence call where a man had taken his ex-wife and children hostage. During the rescue, an explosion occurred. Rex saved 3 lives that day, including a little girl about Lily's age. Claire studied the photograph, noting the intelligence in the dog's dark eyes and the proud set of his shoulders. What happened to him? His handler died in the explosion. Rex sustained severe injuries, a 6-inch laceration across his right flank and internal trauma that ended his police career. He's been with us for 18 months now, and despite our best efforts, Dr. Hayes's voice caught slightly. He's scheduled for euthanasia next week. No one wants to adopt an older dog with behavioral issues and medical needs. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. 2 damaged souls facing their darkest moments, each carrying scars that the world deemed too difficult to heal. I can't guarantee anything, Dr. Hayes admitted honestly. But I've seen Rex with children before. There's something about innocence in pain that calls to him. And Lily, she has the kind of gentle spirit that might reach past his defenses. Thomas looked at his wife, seeing his own desperate hope reflected in her eyes. They had tried everything conventional medicine offered. Traditional therapy had failed. Medications were unsuitable for a child so young. What did they have left to lose except the last fragments of their daughter's childhood? If we do this, Claire asked carefully, and they don't connect, then Rex goes to sleep peacefully, knowing someone tried to help him one last time. And Lily will have learned that some attempts at healing are worth making, even when success isn't guaranteed. The Savannah Animal Therapy Center occupied a restored Victorian mansion on the outskirts of the historic district, its wraparound porch and gabled windows offering a sense of home rather than clinical sterility. Spanish moss draped the surrounding oak trees like nature's own therapy room, and the sound of other animals, dogs barking playfully, cats purring contentedly, created a symphony of life that felt like hope made audible. As they walked up the front steps, Lily clutching Claire's hand with desperate intensity, none of them could have imagined that this moment would change not just their lives, but the very definition of what it meant to heal. Rex lay in the corner of the sunlit therapy room like a fallen monument, his once magnificent frame now carrying the weight of invisible wounds that ran deeper than the jagged scar across his right flank. At 8 years old, the German Shepherd had served his country and community with unwavering loyalty, his decorated career spanning bomb detection, drug interdiction, and search and rescue operations that had saved dozens of lives. Now he refused food, ignored visitors, and spent his days staring at shadows that seemed to hold memories too painful to release. Dr. Sarah Hayes watched from the doorway as Lily entered the room with the cautious steps of a child who had learned that the world could turn dangerous without warning. The little girl's golden curls caught the afternoon light streaming through tall windows, but her eyes held the same hollow distance that marked Rex's gaze. Both had retreated into themselves, building walls that kept out pain but also prevented healing. "That's Rex," Dr. Hayes said softly, settling into a chair positioned carefully between the child and the dog. "He's been very sad since his best friend went to heaven. Sometimes when our hearts hurt so much, we forget how to let people help us." Lily stopped several feet away from Rex, her small hand still clutching her mother's with desperate intensity. The dog lifted his head slightly, dark eyes studying this new arrival with the first spark of interest he'd shown in weeks. Something about her stillness spoke to him, the way she held herself like a creature ready to flee, the careful distance she maintained from anything that might cause harm. Claire felt her heart break a little more as she watched her daughter's fearful assessment of the therapy room. Every toy, every piece of furniture, every potential hiding place was catalogued with the hypervigilance of a child who had learned that monsters could wear familiar faces. "It's okay, baby," she whispered. Just sit wherever you feel comfortable. Instead of choosing a chair or the colorful play area, Lily slowly lowered herself to the floor, cross-legged and perfectly still, about 6 feet from where Rex lay. She studied his scarred flank with the solemn attention that only children possess, her head tilted slightly as if trying to understand something profound about pain and survival. Rex's ears twitched forward, the first purposeful movement he'd made in days. This small human radiated the same energy he recognized in wounded animals. Hurt, but not broken, afraid, but not defeated. His nostrils flared slightly, picking up scents that told their own story. Fear, yes, but also the lingering traces of love and safety that meant she belonged to people who cared for her. He got hurt saving a little girl, Dr. Hayes explained, watching both child and dog with professional fascination. A very brave little girl who was in terrible danger. Rex ran into a burning building to bring her out, but the bad man had set a trap. The explosion hurt Rex's body, but losing his partner hurt his heart even more. Lily's eyes never left Rex as she processed this information. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she raised her right hand and placed it over her own heart. The gesture was so simple, so profound, that Claire had to bite her lip to keep from sobbing. Her daughter was acknowledging her own invisible wound, the place where trust had been shattered and innocence stolen. Rex saw the gesture and something shifted in his chest. A recognition, perhaps, or a remembrance of purpose that had been buried under months of grief and confusion. He lifted his head fully now, studying this small human who seemed to understand that some injuries couldn't be seen, but were no less real. "You hurt too," Lily whispered, the first words she'd spoken to anyone outside her immediate family since the encounter with Dr. Sinclair. Her voice was barely audible, rusty from disuse, but it carried across the room like a bridge spanning the distance between two isolated souls. The breakthrough was so unexpected that Dr. Hayes held her breath, afraid to disturb the delicate connection forming before her eyes. Rex's tail gave a tentative twitch, not quite a wag, but the first sign of emotional response they'd witnessed since his arrival at the center. Over the following weeks, a routine developed that became sacred to both child and dog. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Claire would drive Lily to the therapy center where she would sit quietly beside Rex, sometimes speaking in whispers that only he could hear. She told him about butterflies and favorite dolls, about nightmares that made her afraid to sleep, and dreams that made her sad to wake up. Rex listened with the patience of a confessor, his breathing deep and steady as Lily's small hand rested lightly on his shoulder. When she cried, silent tears that slipped down her cheeks like rain on windows, he would shift slightly closer, offering the warmth of his body as comfort. When she laughed at something Meemaw had said or a funny story from school, his ears would perk forward as if storing the sound for darker moments. Dr. Hayes began developing a specialized communication system based on hand signals and gestures, building on the natural understanding that seemed to exist between Lily and Rex. A hand placed on top of his head meant, "I'm scared and need you close." A gentle touch to his paw signaled, "Stay here with me." Pointing indicated direction or danger, while an open palm meant, "It's safe now." The transformation in both patients was remarkable, but gradual. Rex began eating regularly again, his coat regaining its natural luster as physical health followed emotional healing. He started responding to commands and showing interest in his surroundings, though his loyalty remained focused primarily on Lily. She in turn began speaking more frequently, though still in whispers, and only to Rex, Dr. Hayes, or her family. Meanwhile, Savannah's veneer of safety was beginning to crack, as disturbing reports filtered through police channels and neighborhood gossip networks. 7-year-old Madison Cooper vanished from Forsyth Park during what should have been a routine family picnic. Her parents had turned their attention away for less than 5 minutes while dealing with their toddler son, and when they looked back, Madison was simply gone. No screams, no signs of struggle, no witnesses, despite dozens of people in the area. 6 weeks later, 5-year-old Hannah Morrison disappeared from Little Saints Daycare during afternoon playtime. The teachers were certain she'd been on the playground moments before, but a head count revealed her absence with the same terrifying inexplicability that had marked Madison's case. Security cameras showed nothing unusual, and a massive search involving hundreds of volunteers turned up no trace of either child. The community response was swift and fearful. Parents began keeping children indoors after school, organized neighborhood watches, and demanded increased police patrols. Churches held special prayer services while local media speculated about everything from custody disputes to human trafficking rings. The easy trust that had characterized Savannah's historic neighborhoods evaporated like morning mist, replaced by hypervigilance and suspicion. Dr. Marcus Sinclair inserted himself into the investigation with the concerned enthusiasm of a devoted community member. He attended every neighborhood meeting, volunteered for search parties, and offered his professional insights about child psychology to anyone who would listen. His presence at these gatherings was both reassuring and natural. After all, who understood children better than their beloved pediatrician? But Rex noticed what humans missed. During their walks through the historic district, the German Shepherd would become increasingly agitated as they approached certain areas. His hackles would rise near the antique shops on Bull Street. His breathing would quicken when they passed the cathedral where Dr. Sinclair served as deacon, and he would pull insistently away from the magnificent mansion with white columns where the doctor lived alone among his memories and delusions. Lily felt Rex's tension during these moments, though she couldn't interpret its meaning. She would place her hand on his head, their signal for fear, and he would press closer to her, his body creating a protective barrier between her and whatever invisible threat he sensed. These episodes troubled Dr. Hayes, who documented them carefully while trying to understand their significance. "It's not uncommon for trauma survivors to develop hypervigilance," she explained to Claire during one of their regular consultations. "Rex was trained to detect danger, and sometimes that training can create false alarms during recovery. The important thing is that he's bonding with Lily and helping her feel secure." But Rex's instincts weren't creating false alarms. They were detecting a predator who had learned to hunt within plain sight, using trust and authority as camouflage for increasingly bold attacks. Dr. Sinclair's basement had been carefully prepared with soundproofing and specialized locks, climate control to preserve his treasures, and enough supplies to keep a child alive for months, while he gradually broke down their resistance and molded them into the perfect, obedient daughters who would never leave him as Emma had. The missing children were not missing. They were imprisoned beneath one of Savannah's most respected residences, their desperate cries muffled by brick walls and the sound of classical music that Dr. Sinclair played continuously to mask any noise. Madison had lasted 3 weeks before the combination of terror and inadequate medical care led to a heart attack that stopped her small body. Hannah was stronger, more resilient, but she was fading as malnutrition and despair took their toll. As autumn approached, bringing with it the scent of wood smoke and dying leaves, Rex's agitation during their neighborhood walks intensified. He would whine softly when they passed Dr. Sinclair's mansion, his nose twitching as if detecting something that made his training instincts scream warnings. Lily noticed these reactions and began avoiding those streets entirely, trusting her canine companion's judgment even when she couldn't understand its source. The bond between them had evolved beyond therapy into something profound and unshakable. Rex had found new purpose in protecting this small human who understood pain, while Lily had discovered that love could exist even in the aftermath of trauma. They were healing each other through presence, patience, and the kind of unconditional acceptance that asked nothing but offered everything. But their peaceful recovery was about to be shattered by a revelation that would test every lesson they'd learned about trust, courage, and the terrible necessity of speaking truth when silence meant letting evil continue to flourish in the shadows. 6 months had passed since Rex and Lily first found each other in that sunlit therapy room, and their bond had become the talk of Savannah's medical community. Dr. Hayes documented their progress with a mixture of professional fascination and personal wonder, watching as two damaged souls continued healing each other through an understanding that transcended species barriers. Rex had regained 20 pounds of healthy weight, his coat gleaming with renewed vitality, while Lily spoke in full sentences now, still softly, still cautiously, but with growing confidence that her voice mattered. The breakthrough that would change everything came on a crisp October morning when Detective James Morrison, Hannah's father, made a desperate visit to the Brennan household. The seasoned police officer's face bore the haggard marks of sleepless nights and fruitless investigations, his uniform wrinkled and his eyes holding the hollow desperation of a parent watching hope slip away one day at a time. "Mrs. Brennan," he said, his voice cracking slightly as Claire invited him into their living room where Meemaw sat knitting and Lily played quietly with Rex on the braided rug. "I know this is unusual, but we've exhausted every lead, every angle, every possibility we can think of. My Hannah's been missing for 4 months now, and Madison Cooper's been gone for 7. We're running out of time." Thomas looked up from the morning paper, his construction worker hands gripping the pages as he studied the detective's face. "What can we do to help? We've already given statements about what happened with Dr. Sinclair, and Lily's told you everything she remembers about that day." Detective Morrison knelt beside Lily, his voice gentle but urgent. "Sweetheart, I know you've been through something terrible, and I know talking about scary things is hard, but Rex here, he's special, isn't he? He notices things that people miss. Has he ever acted strange or upset when you're walking around the neighborhood?" Lily's small hand instinctively found Rex's head, their established signal for comfort and security. The German shepherd pressed closer to her, his dark eyes alert and focused on the conversation with an intelligence that seemed almost human. "Rex doesn't like the big white house," she whispered, her voice barely audible but clear enough to make every adult in the room lean forward. "Which big white house, honey?" Detective Morrison asked, though his pulse had already begun to quicken with an intuition he couldn't yet name. "The one where Dr. Marcus lives," Lily continued, her fingers working through Rex's fur as she spoke. "When we walk past there, Rex gets all tight and scared. His fur stands up and he pulls me away. And he smells something bad there." The silence that followed was deafening. Detective Morrison's face went pale as the implications crashed over him like a cold wave. Dr. Marcus Sinclair, the beloved pediatrician who had volunteered for every search party, who had offered psychological insights about the missing children, who had comforted grieving families with his gentle authority and medical expertise. "Jesus Christ," Thomas breathed, the newspaper crumpling in his suddenly nerveless fingers. "You don't think... it couldn't be." But Rex was already responding to the shift in energy in the room, his body going rigid with recognition as the scent of fear and realization filled the air. He stood slowly, placing himself between Lily and the adults, his training instincts awakening as he sensed that danger was being discussed, identified, and finally understood. Claire felt her world tilt on its axis as memories cascaded through her mind with terrible clarity. Doctor. Sinclair's sudden interest in Lily that spring morning, his medical bag that seemed heavier than usual, the way his hands had trembled as he reached for her daughter, Mima's arthritis flaring with supernatural timing, the smug confidence in his eyes when he'd driven away, as if he knew he was untouchable. "That son of a bitch," Mima whispered, her knitting needles clicking together with unusual violence. "I knew something was wrong that day. My joints don't lie. They've been warning me about storms and trouble for 70 years, and they screamed danger when that man got near our baby." Detective Morrison was already reaching for his radio, his training taking over as the pieces of an impossible puzzle suddenly clicked into place. Dr. Marcus Sinclair had been hiding in plain sight, using his medical authority and community standing as the perfect camouflage for predatory behavior. Who would suspect the man who had delivered half the babies in Savannah? Who would question the doctor who volunteered his time to help search for missing children? "This is Detective Morrison requesting immediate backup at 1247 Magnolia Street." He spoke into his radio, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "I need surveillance units positioned around the Sinclair residence on Forsyth Square, but maintain distance. Possible suspect in the Cooper and Morrison abductions." Rex's ears perked forward at the mention of Sinclair's name, a low growl rumbling in his chest as if the very sound triggered memories he'd been unable to articulate. His nose twitched, recalling scents from their neighborhood walks, something chemical and wrong emanating from the basement of that grand mansion, something that made his canine training instincts scream warnings about hidden dangers and concealed victims. Within hours, Savannah's law enforcement machinery had mobilized with the precision of a military operation. Search warrants were obtained based on Rex's behavioral evidence and Lily's testimony, while surveillance teams confirmed suspicious activity at the Sinclair mansion. Deliveries of children's clothing, bulk food purchases, and soundproofing materials purchased over the past several months painted a horrifying picture of premeditation and systematic planning. Judge Patricia Sullivan, who would later preside over the trial that would shake Savannah to its core, signed the search warrant with hands that trembled slightly as she read the supporting documentation. The idea that Dr. Marcus Sinclair, a man she had known professionally and socially for decades, could be capable of such monstrous acts challenged everything she believed about human nature and community trust. The raid on the Sinclair mansion was planned for dawn, when the doctor would be least likely to expect visitors and most likely to be caught off guard. Detective Morrison insisted on being part of the team, despite the obvious conflict of interest represented by his missing daughter. His captain agreed reluctantly, understanding that no parent should have to wait for news when their child's life hung in the balance. Rex sensed the building tension in the Brennan household as preparations continued through the night. He paced restlessly, his natural protective instincts heightened by the emotional energy of the adults around him. Lily clung to him with unusual intensity, her small arms wrapped around his neck as she whispered reassurances that seemed as much for her own comfort as for his. "You're a good boy, Rex," she murmured into his fur. "You told them about the bad smells. You're going to help save the other little girls, aren't you?" Dr. Hayes arrived at the Brennan house just before dawn, her professional composure masking deep personal turmoil as she processed the implications of the investigation. If Dr. Sinclair was indeed responsible for the missing children, it meant that evil had been walking among them for months, perhaps years, wearing the face of healing and compassion while perpetrating unthinkable crimes against the most vulnerable members of their community. Rex's behavioral responses weren't trauma-related hypervigilance, she explained to the assembled group, her voice tight with self-recrimination. They were accurate threat assessment based on scent detection and environmental cues that we couldn't perceive. He was trying to warn us all along, and we interpreted his reactions as symptoms of psychological damage rather than evidence of real danger. As the sun began to rise over Savannah's historic district, painting the Spanish moss in shades of gold and amber, the tactical team took their positions around Dr. Sinclair's mansion. The beautiful antebellum architecture, with its towering white columns and perfectly manicured gardens, seemed to mock the horror that might be concealed within its walls. How many times had neighbors admired this house, envied its elegance, and respected the man who lived there alone with his grief and his secrets? Detective Morrison checked his weapon one final time, his thoughts focused entirely on his daughter Hannah and the possibility that she might still be alive somewhere in that mansion's hidden depths. Madison Cooper's parents waited at the police station, their faces etched with a hope so desperate it was painful to witness. If the children were found alive, it would be a miracle. If they were found dead, at least the not knowing would finally end. Rex stood at the Brennan family's front window, his entire body tense with anticipation as he watched official vehicles position themselves around the neighborhood. Something fundamental was about to change, and his canine instincts told him that the danger he had sensed for months was finally about to be confronted. His loyalty belonged to Lily, but his training belonged to justice, and both were about to converge in ways that would test everything he had learned about protecting the innocent. The morning air carried the scent of jasmine and approaching rain, but underneath those familiar fragrances, Rex detected something else. The metallic tang of fear and the chemical signature of secrets about to be exposed. He pressed closer to the window, his dark eyes fixed on the mansion where truth was about to collide with carefully constructed lies, and where his nose might finally lead investigators to answers that had remained hidden for far too long. The raid on Dr. Marcus Sinclair's mansion began at exactly 5:47 a.m. when the first pale fingers of dawn crept across Forsyth Square's cobblestones. Detective Morrison's heart hammered against his ribs as the tactical team moved with practiced precision toward the imposing white columns that had stood sentinel over Savannah's most prestigious address for over a century. The irony wasn't lost on him that such architectural beauty could conceal such unspeakable horror. The front door splintered under the battering ram's impact, sending shards of antique wood across marble floors that had welcomed generations of Savannah's elite. "Police! Search warrant!" The shouts echoed through rooms filled with priceless antiques and family portraits whose painted eyes seemed to witness the violation of their sanctuary with silent accusation. Doctor. Sinclair met them in his silk pajamas and leather slippers, his silver hair perfectly combed despite the early hour, his expression one of wounded dignity rather than surprise. "Gentlemen, surely this is unnecessary," he said with the calm authority that had reassured countless worried parents over 3 decades of practice. "I'm happy to cooperate with any investigation, but breaking down my door seems rather excessive." But Detective Morrison was already pushing past him, following Rex's behavioral patterns from their neighborhood walks toward the back of the house where the German Shepherd's agitation had always intensified. Other officers spread through the mansion's labyrinthine rooms, their flashlights cutting through shadows that seemed to hold secrets in every corner. It was Officer Janet Rodriguez who found the hidden entrance, a bookshelf in Sinclair's study that swung away to reveal a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air that rose from below carried scents that made her stomach clench, disinfectant, human waste, and underneath it all, the sweet, sick smell of fear that seemed to permeate the walls themselves. "Down here!" she called, her voice cracking with adrenaline and dread. "I've got stairs leading to what looks like a basement level." Detective Morrison was the first to descend, his weapon drawn and his flashlight beam dancing across walls that had been lined with soundproofing material. The basement had been converted into something that defied description. Part medical facility, part prison, part dollhouse designed by a madman's fractured psyche. Child-sized furniture sat alongside IV poles and restraint systems, while the walls were covered with photographs of missing children from across Georgia and South Carolina. Hannah Morrison lay on a small bed in the farthest corner, her 7-year-old body so thin that her father barely recognized her. She was alive but unconscious, an IV tube snaking from her arm to a bag of saline solution that had kept her hydrated through months of captivity. Her blonde hair had been brushed and braided with obsessive care, and she wore a clean pink dress that was 3 sizes too large for her wasted frame. "Hannah! Baby! Daddy's here!" Detective Morrison's voice broke as he gathered his daughter into his arms, feeling how light she had become, how her ribs showed through the fabric of her dress. Paramedics rushed down the stairs behind him, their equipment clattering against the narrow walls as they fought to save a child who had survived the unthinkable. But Hannah was alone in that basement prison. Madison Cooper's bed was empty, her belongings neatly arranged on a small dresser as if she might return at any moment. A journal on Sinclair's desk revealed the horrifying truth in meticulous medical handwriting. Madison had died 6 weeks earlier from what he clinically described as cardiac arrest following prolonged stress response. Her body had been cremated in the mansion's basement furnace, leaving no trace except the doctor's detached observations about the failure of his treatment protocol. Upstairs, Dr. Sinclair sat calmly in his library chair, hands folded in his lap, as if he were receiving visitors for afternoon tea rather than facing arrest for kidnapping, imprisonment, and murder. When Detective Morrison emerged from the basement carrying his barely conscious daughter, Sinclair's expression showed no remorse, no recognition of wrongdoing, only the mild disappointment of a researcher whose experiment had been interrupted. "You don't understand," he said quietly, as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "I was protecting them. The world is so dangerous for little girls. Car accidents, predators, diseases, heartbreak. Down there they were safe, they were loved. They were never going to experience the pain that destroys innocence." The words hit Detective Morrison like physical blows. This man, this monster wearing the face of healing, had convinced himself that imprisonment was protection, that stealing children was salvation. The complete break from reality was so profound that it chilled everyone within earshot to their very souls. Dr. Sarah Hayes arrived at the scene just as paramedics loaded Hannah Morrison into an ambulance, the child's vital signs weak but stable after months of medical captivity that had kept her alive while slowly killing her spirit. As Rebecca Sinclair's sister, Sarah's world imploded as she realized that her brother-in-law, the man she had trusted, respected, and grieved alongside, was responsible for atrocities that defied comprehension. "My sister didn't die in a simple car accident," she whispered to Detective Morrison, pieces of a horrific puzzle finally clicking into place. Rebecca had been asking questions about missing children in other cities where Marcus had worked. She suspected something, didn't she? And he killed her to keep his secret safe. The revelation added another layer of horror to an already incomprehensible crime. Dr. Sinclair had murdered his own wife when she grew too close to discovering his pattern of child abduction, then spent 3 years grieving publicly while continuing to steal other people's daughters in a twisted attempt to replace the child he and Rebecca had lost. Back at the Brennan house, Rex paced anxiously at the front window, his sensitive nose detecting the emotional chaos that filled the neighborhood like smoke. Lily sat beside him, her small hand resting on his head in their signal for comfort, both of them understanding that something terrible was being resolved, but not yet knowing whether the resolution would bring peace or more pain. When Claire's phone rang with news that Hannah Morrison had been found alive, the relief was so overwhelming that she sank to her knees beside Rex and Lily, pulling both of them into a fierce embrace. "She's alive, baby," she whispered into her daughter's golden curls. "Rex helped save her. You both helped save her by being brave enough to tell the truth about what you saw. But even as joy flooded through them, the shadow of Madison Cooper's fate hung over the community like a mourning shroud. One child saved, one child lost forever, and a man they had all trusted revealed as a monster whose crimes would haunt Savannah for generations to come. The beautiful antebellum mansion that had been the pride of Forsyth Square would now stand as a monument to evil disguised as respectability, its white columns forever stained with the knowledge of what horrors they had concealed. The hardest truth of all was still to come, the realization that Dr. Sinclair had not acted alone, and that the network of complicity and cover-up extended far deeper into Savannah's power structure than anyone had dared to imagine. The trial of Dr. Marcus Sinclair began 3 months later in Savannah's historic courthouse, a Greek Revival building whose marble columns and soaring ceilings had witnessed decades of justice served and justice denied. The media attention was unprecedented. CNN, Fox, and every major network had descended upon the quiet southern city like a plague of locusts, their satellite trucks and camera crews transforming the dignified square into a circus of flashing lights and shouted questions. Judge Patricia Sullivan presided with the stern dignity that had defined her 30-year career on the bench, but even her experienced composure cracked slightly as she reviewed the evidence files. Crime scene photographs, medical records, and psychological evaluations painted a portrait of evil so methodical and calculating that it challenged fundamental assumptions about human nature and the capacity for trusted professionals to betray the innocent. Hannah Morrison, now 8 years old and slowly recovering from months of captivity, would not testify. Her pediatric psychiatrist deemed her too fragile, too traumatized by experiences that no child should ever endure. Instead, her medical records spoke for her. Evidence of prolonged malnutrition, psychological conditioning, and medical procedures performed without consent by a man who had convinced himself that imprisonment was protection. But Lily Kate Brennan would testify, and her presence in that courthouse with Rex at her side represented something unprecedented in Georgia's legal history. Never before had a therapy dog been permitted in such a high-profile criminal trial, and the decision sparked fierce debate among legal scholars and disability rights advocates across the nation. Defense attorney Michael Hartwell argued passionately against Rex's presence. "Your Honor, this is highly prejudicial." A large German Shepherd in the courtroom will evoke emotional responses from the jury that have nothing to do with the facts of this case. My client deserves a fair trial based on evidence, not sympathy generated by a child's pet. Prosecutor Jennifer Adams countered with equal fervor. "Your Honor, Lily Brennan is 7 years old and a trauma survivor. Rex is not a pet. He's a medically prescribed therapeutic intervention that allows this child to participate in these proceedings. Without him, she cannot function as a witness, and without her testimony, a crucial piece of evidence is lost." Judge Sullivan's decision was swift and final. The dog stays. This court will not deny a child witness the support she needs to tell her truth, regardless of how that truth might affect the defendant's case. Dr. Sinclair sat at the defense table with an unsettling calmness, his silver hair perfectly groomed and his expression one of mild disappointment rather than fear or remorse. He wore a navy suit that conveyed respectability and authority, the same outfit he might have chosen for a medical conference or church service. To observers unfamiliar with his crimes, he looked like exactly what he had always been, a distinguished physician whose gentle demeanor inspired trust and confidence. But Rex knew better. The moment Lily entered the courtroom with the German Shepherd at her side, the dog's entire body went rigid with recognition and warning. His hackles rose despite months of training to remain calm in public settings, and a low growl rumbled from deep in his chest, a sound so primal and threatening that several jurors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Lily felt Rex's reaction and immediately placed her small hand on top of his head, their established signal for danger and the need for protection. What happened next would be debated in legal circles for years to come, analyzed in law school textbooks, and cited in precedent-setting cases across the country. Rex did not simply growl or show agitation. He locked his dark eyes on Dr. Sinclair with the focused intensity of a predator identifying prey. His training as a K-9 officer overriding months of therapy work, as every instinct screamed that this man represented a clear and present danger to the child he was sworn to protect. The courtroom fell silent except for the sound of Rex's low, continuous growl, a warning that seemed to emerge from the very depths of canine evolution when wolves first learned to distinguish between those who protected their pack and those who threatened it. Spectators held their breath, jurors leaned forward in their seats, and even the court stenographer stopped typing as everyone processed what they were witnessing. Judge Sullivan's gavel came down hard, the sharp crack echoing through the chamber like a gunshot. "This court will take an immediate recess," she announced, her voice carrying an urgency that surprised everyone present. "Bailiff, please escort the jury to the deliberation room. All attorneys in my chambers immediately." As the courtroom emptied, Rex remained focused on Dr. Sinclair with unwavering intensity, his body positioned protectively between Lily and the defendant. The child wrapped her arms around the dog's neck, whispering reassurances that seemed as much for her own comfort as for his. "It's okay, Rex. I see him too. But we're safe now. We told the truth, and they're going to stop him." In Judge Sullivan's chambers, the legal teams faced each other across a conference table, while the implications of what had just occurred settled over them like a heavy shroud. Defense attorney Hartwell was already preparing his appeal arguments, claiming that Rex's dramatic reaction had irreparably prejudiced the jury against his client. "Your Honor, what just happened in there was nothing short of orchestrated theater designed to inflame the jury's emotions. That dog was clearly trained to react aggressively toward my client, and this entire proceeding has become a travesty of justice." But Prosecutor Adams had done her homework on Rex's background and capabilities. "Your Honor, Rex is a retired K-9 officer with extensive training in threat detection and scent identification. His reaction wasn't theatrical. It was professional recognition based on sensory input that humans cannot perceive. This dog has identified Dr. Sinclair as a threat, and given his track record for accuracy in criminal detection, that identification should be considered evidence, not prejudice." Judge Sullivan studied both attorneys with the calculating gaze of someone weighing legal precedent against moral imperative. In her 3 decades on the bench, she had never faced a situation quite like this one, where the boundaries between evidence and emotion, between justice and spectacle, seemed to blur beyond recognition. "The reaction we just witnessed was spontaneous and uncoached," she said finally. "This dog has no agenda, no motivation to lie or manipulate. If anything, his response represents the purest form of truth this courtroom has seen, instinctual recognition based on sensory evidence that transcends human bias or legal maneuvering." The revelation that would transform the case came during the recess, when Detective Morrison's investigation team made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the law enforcement community. Hidden in Dr. Sinclair's home office, behind a false wall that had taken forensic specialists weeks to locate, they found detailed records of his crimes dating back 15 years and spanning multiple states. But more disturbing than the evidence of past victims was the discovery of future plans. Lists of potential targets, surveillance photographs of children from across Savannah, and detailed psychological profiles that revealed the scope of his predatory network. Dr. Sinclair had not been working alone. The files contained references to associates and collaborators, suggesting a conspiracy that reached far beyond one man's twisted delusions. Most shocking of all was the revelation that emerged from Rebecca Sinclair's medical records, obtained through a court order after Dr. Hayes provided testimony about her sister's suspicious death. The autopsy report had been falsified, the toxicology results altered, and the investigating officer's notes edited to support the conclusion of accidental death. Rebecca Sinclair had been murdered because she had discovered her husband's crimes and threatened to expose them. The man responsible for covering up that murder sat in the same courtroom every day, wearing a bailiff's uniform and maintaining order while protecting the very monster he had helped create. Thomas Mackenzie, a 20-year veteran of the Chatham County Sheriff's Department, had used his position and authority to facilitate Dr. Sinclair's crimes for over a decade, providing inside information about police investigations and ensuring that evidence disappeared when it threatened to expose their operation. When this revelation broke during the trial's second week, the courtroom erupted in chaos. Mackenzie was arrested on the spot, his badge and weapon confiscated as he was led away in handcuffs, while spectators shouted accusations and reporters fought for the best camera angles. Dr. Sinclair's mask finally slipped as he watched his accomplice being taken into custody. For the first time since his arrest, genuine emotion crossed his features. Not remorse or shame, but rage at having his carefully constructed network exposed and dismantled. "You fools!" he hissed at the prosecution table, his voice carrying a venom that made everyone within earshot recoil. "You have no idea what you've done. There are others, so many others, and now they'll simply disappear deeper underground. Those children needed protection, and you've destroyed their only sanctuary." The chilling words revealed the full scope of his delusion and the possibility that their investigation had only scratched the surface of a much larger conspiracy. 1 year later, the morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of the Brennan family's kitchen, casting gentle patterns across the breakfast table where Lily sat reading aloud from her second-grade primer. Her voice, once silenced by trauma, now carried the clear confidence of a child who had learned that speaking truth could change the world. Rex lay beside her chair, his graying muzzle resting on crossed paws, his dark eyes following her finger as it traced each word. "The brave dog helped the little girl find her way home," Lily read carefully, then looked down at Rex with a smile that lit up the entire room. "Just like you helped Hannah find her way home, didn't you, boy?" Rex's tail thumped against the kitchen floor with the satisfied rhythm of a job well done. At 9 years old, he moved more slowly now, his joints stiff from the morning's autumn chill, but his spirit burned brighter than ever. The purpose he had lost when his police career ended had been restored through his partnership with Lily, transforming them both from broken survivors into symbols of healing and hope. Dr. Marcus Sinclair had been sentenced to life without parole, his once distinguished career reduced to a cautionary tale about the monsters that could hide behind masks of respectability and trust. Thomas Mackenzie received 25 years for his role in covering up the crimes, his badge and pension stripped away as evidence of his betrayal mounted. The conspiracy they had uncovered stretched across 3 states and involved 12 missing children, making it one of the largest child trafficking networks in southeastern history. Hannah Morrison sat at her own kitchen table 3 blocks away, her blonde hair now grown back to its natural length after months of medical care and psychological therapy. At 8 years old, she still struggled with nightmares and hypervigilance, but her laughter had returned. Tentative at first, then growing stronger with each passing day, the Morrison family had moved to a new house across town, leaving behind the memories associated with their old neighborhood while building new traditions based on gratitude and second chances. "Daddy, can we visit Rex and Lily today?" Hannah asked, looking up from her cereal bowl with eyes that sparkled with anticipation. Detective Morrison, who had taken extended leave to focus on his daughter's recovery, nodded with the easy agreement of a father who understood that some friendships were forged in fire and made stronger by shared survival. The bond between Hannah and Lily had become legendary in Savannah's medical community, two children whose paths had crossed through tragedy but whose futures were brightened by their understanding of each other's journey. They met weekly for play dates that were part friendship, part therapy, both girls drawing strength from someone who truly comprehended what it meant to face darkness and emerge into light. Dr. Sarah Hayes had transformed her animal therapy center into a model program studied by universities across the nation, with Rex serving as the prototype for a new generation of therapy animals trained specifically to work with trauma survivors. The waiting list for her services stretched 6 months, families traveling from as far as Florida and North Carolina, seeking the healing that could only come from the unconditional love of animals who had survived their own battles. Rex changed everything we thought we knew about animal-assisted therapy, Dr. Hayes explained to a visiting delegation from the American Psychological Association. His ability to detect emotional distress and respond appropriately wasn't just training. It was instinct refined by experience. He taught us that healing doesn't always follow a textbook timeline, and that sometimes the most powerful medicine comes on 4 legs with a wagging tail. The Brennan family had adopted Rex officially 6 months after the trial ended, the paperwork making legal what their hearts had known from the moment Lily placed her small hand on his scarred head. Thomas built a special ramp to help Rex navigate the front porch steps more easily, while Claire researched senior dog nutrition and exercise routines designed to keep aging joints flexible and spirits high. Meemaw Brennan, now 73 and as sharp as ever, had become Rex's most devoted caretaker, spending hours brushing his coat while regaling him with stories about her late husband's military service. "You boys understand duty," she would murmur into his fur during their quiet moments on the front porch. "You know what it means to put others before yourself, to stand guard when others sleep safely in their beds." The mansion where Dr. Sinclair had committed his crimes stood empty now, its white columns stained with the knowledge of what had occurred within those walls. The city council debated its fate monthly. Some wanted it demolished as a monument to evil. Others argued for converting it into a crisis center for abused children. For now, it remained untouched, its windows dark and its gardens overgrown, a reminder that evil could flourish in the most unlikely places. But from that darkness had emerged something beautiful and transformative. The Rex Memorial Fund, established by Detective Morrison and supported by donations from across the country, provided therapy animals for children who had survived trauma. 50 dogs had been placed in homes within the first year, each one carrying forward Rex's legacy of healing through unconditional love and silent understanding. Judge Patricia Sullivan had presided over the adoption ceremony that made Rex officially part of the Brennan family, her usually stern courtroom demeanor softening as she watched Lily sign her name carefully on the adoption papers while Rex sat patiently beside her. "This court has seen many legal proceedings," she said with uncharacteristic emotion, "but none more important than this one. Today we make official what love has already accomplished." The ceremony had been covered by national media, Rex's story inspiring legislation in 12 states requiring therapy animal access for child witnesses in criminal proceedings. The Rex Rule, as it became known, recognized that justice sometimes required compassion, and that the legal system had an obligation to protect the most vulnerable participants in its proceedings. As autumn deepened into winter, the Brennan household settled into rhythms of contentment that felt miraculous after the chaos of the previous year. Lily excelled in school, her teachers marveling at the confidence and empathy she displayed when helping classmates who struggled with their own fears and anxieties. Rex accompanied her to special reading sessions where children practiced literacy skills by reading aloud to therapy animals, his patient presence encouraging shy voices to grow stronger. On quiet evenings, when homework was finished and dinner dishes were cleared away, the family would gather in their living room while Lily practiced piano and Rex dozed contentedly nearby. These moments felt sacred to Claire and Thomas, proof that happiness could grow from the ashes of trauma, that families could be made stronger by surviving challenges that once seemed insurmountable. "You know what the best part is?" Lily asked one evening, as she scratched behind Rex's ears while he sprawled across her lap despite his considerable size. "Rex taught me that being broken doesn't mean being worthless. Sometimes the broken pieces fit together in new ways that are even stronger than before." Outside, Spanish moss swayed gently in the evening breeze, and the scent of jasmine drifted through open windows, carrying with it the promise that tomorrow would bring new opportunities for joy, healing, and the kind of love that asks nothing but gives everything in return. Dear friends, Rex and Lily's story reminds us that our most meaningful chapters can begin when we think our story is ending. At your stage of life, you understand what it means to carry invisible scars. The loss of loved ones, health challenges, financial worries, or feeling invisible in a world that celebrates youth. Like Rex, you may feel retired from your prime, wondering if your best days of making a difference are behind you. But this story proves that broken doesn't mean worthless. Rex found his greatest purpose not in his prime, but in his golden years, using his wounds to heal another wounded soul. Your experience, wisdom, and capacity for unconditional love are exactly what this world needs. The children and grandchildren in your life need your steady presence, your patient listening, your hard-earned perspective that only comes from surviving life's storms. You are not past your expiration date. You are ripened into exactly who you were meant to be. Your scars tell stories of survival that can guide others through their darkness. Like Rex, your most important mission might be just beginning, waiting for that moment when your unique combination of experience and love becomes someone else's lifeline. Discussion questions. When in your life have you felt retired from usefulness only to discover a new purpose later? How has an older adult's wisdom or presence made a lasting impact on your life or your family's? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.